Hey folks, greetings to all of you. Today we are going to start a new subject, that is environment. Environment holds importance in all the stages of UPSC. It accounts for about 20 to 30 marks in prelims and 30 to 50 marks in mains. Though most of the questions in environment are from current affairs, it is important to understand the basic concepts in order to understand those current affairs better. So this will be the agenda for video to make the concepts clear. So without much delay, let's get started. For today, we are going to discuss about environment, habitat and ecosystem. So environment is nothing but our surroundings. Everything in our surroundings can be grouped into two, the living and the non-living. So the living organisms in technical terms are called as biotic components, and the non-living organism in technical terms are called as the abiotic components. So along with these two, environment is also about the interactions. Here we will discuss about two types of interactions. Interactions between the biotic and abiotic components, and interaction within the biotic components and within the abiotic components. So here is the definition. You guys may refer to it. Coming to ecosystem, let's start with the definition here. An ecosystem is a functional unit of nature where living organisms interact among themselves and also with the surrounding physical environment. Now you guys will be confused because the definition of environment and ecosystem sound similar, but when you look closer, there is a clear distinction between these two. So let me make it clear for you. Environment is a broader term when compared to ecosystem. For example, let us take aquatic ecosystem. In the aquatic ecosystem, you will find fish, you will find something bigger like a whale, but you will not find any terrestrial animal here. Right, like a lion, you will not find a lion, you will not find a tiger here. But in case of environment, the terrestrial ecosystem, aquatic ecosystem, everything is a part of environment. So, ecosystem is just a part of environment and it consists of limited species alone. So, moving on to the components of ecosystem. Ecosystem consists of two components, the biotic component and the abiotic component. The biotic components are further divided into producers, consumers and the decomposers. Producers are nothing but our plants or any organisms that can produce their own food. Most of the consumers depend on producers for their food. Example of producers are plants, as we all know, some bacteria like the blue-green algae, and the planktons in case of aquatic ecosystem. Moving on to consumers, there are three types of consumers: primary consumers, secondary consumers and the tertiary consumers. Primary consumers are herbivorous animals that feed on producers directly. Right? Example, goat, cow, etc. So the secondary consumers are those animals that feed on these primary consumers like the dog, wolves, etc. So tertiary consumers are those organisms that feed on both primary consumers and the secondary consumers. Example, lion and tiger, etc. So moving on to decomposers. Decomposers are those organisms that feed on dead and decaying matter and they transform those dead and decaying matter into organic substances. Example of the decomposers are bacteria, fungi and earthworms. So abiotic component, example of abiotic components are air, water, wind, soil, temperature and rainfall. Right, beyond this, we have inorganic components such as the carbon, water, sulfur, nitrate, phosphorus, etc. and the organic compounds such as protein, carbohydrates, lipids. So these all together are called as the abiotic components. Now we will discuss in detail about the interactions. Interactions of the biotic components with the biotic components themselves and with the abiotic components. So, in case of abiotic component. Let's take the example of water or maybe rainfall. So, why rainfall is important for an organism? Rainfall gives us water, which is the basis of survival of every living organism. So, what if there is an increase in the amount of rainfall? It leads to leaching away of nutrients. Leaching is nothing but the washing out, right? Washing out of nutrients. It also leads to flood, etc. So, what happens when there is a reduction in rainfall? When there is a reduced rainfall, it leads to drought. Again, it affects the living organism. That is the biotic components. Now let us take the example of temperature. Again, temperature is an important component for the survival of every living organism. If there is an increase in temperature, it leads to increased transpiration, something such as the heat waves, something like the heat waves, etc. And when there is a reduction in temperature, it completely retards the growth of many living organisms. For example, when you take an example of tundra, you will barely find any plant here, any tree here, right? So, thus temperature at its optimum level is important for every biotic organism. Likewise, other biotic components such as atmospheric pressure, be it the organic compounds or inorganic compounds, everything have their own role in the life of a biotic component. Moving on to the interactions between biotic and the biotic component. So, if we take our example, human, right? We have friends, we have enemies, right? We are friends with some other human, we are enemies with some other human. Likewise, every other biotic organism also have their friends and enemies, right? Based on such relationships, the interaction between biotic and biotic components are divided into various types such as commensalism, amensalism, etc. And we'll discuss about this in detail in the later chapters. That's all about interactions for now. So, few important terms for you people to remember: eurythermal, stereothermal. These two terms are based on temperature. Eurythermal refers to the organism that can survive in wide range of temperature. Like they can survive in minus degrees too. They can also survive in high temperatures. Another type of organisms are stenothermal. They live in narrow range of temperature, which means a slight increase or decrease in temperature leads to their death. Similarly, we also have for salinity, urohalline and stenohalline. Urohalline refers to those organisms which lives in wide range of salinities, and stenohalline refers to organisms that live in narrow range of salinities. Moving on to the next topic, the classification of ecosystem. So, ecosystems are divided into natural ecosystem and the artificial or man-made ecosystem. Natural ecosystem are further divided into terrestrial and aquatic ecosystem. Again, terrestrial ecosystem are divided into forest ecosystem. These are dominated by trees, as we all know. Grassland ecosystem. These are dominated by grasses. And the desert ecosystem, where you barely find any plants. And the aquatic ecosystems are further divided into freshwater ecosystem and the marine ecosystem. Freshwater ecosystem are divided into lotic, lentic and the wetlands. Lotic is nothing but the running water ecosystem, like the rivers, streams, springs, etc. Lentic is nothing but the standing water ecosystem. For example, ponds, lakes, pools, etc. In cases of wetland, the example are marshes, swamps, mangroves, estuaries, or the example of wetland. Case of marine ecosystem, estuaries will be in the marine ecosystem. So in case of marine ecosystem, we'll find oceans and estuaries there. Coming to the human modified or man-made ecosystem, the example of man-made ecosystem are agro-ecosystem. Agro-ecosystems are nothing but the rice fields, the maize fields. These are the example of agro-ecosystem. Aquaria is an example of man-made ecosystem. Dams, gardens and every other things are the example of man-made ecosystem. Hope you guys are clear with the concept of ecosystem. So moving on to a smaller topic, that is habitat. Habitat is nothing but the physical environment in which an organism lives. Right? It is like the address of an organism. Okay. So various species can have a similar habitat. That is, river may be the habitat. That is the address of a fish, a frog, planktons. Right, so various species can have a similar habitat, and habitat is nothing but the physical environment in which an organism lives. So many habitat together make up the environment. So here let's solve some PYQs. Which one of the following is the best description of ecosystem? So let's see. Here the first option is a community of organisms interacting with one another. You guys may be confused with this option, but this is not ecosystem, right? This is ecological community. So next option is that part of the earth which is inhabited by a living organism. This is nothing but the biosphere. And the D option, the flora and the fauna of the geographical area. This is called as biodiversity. So the right option is C. A community of organisms together with the environment in which they live is called as ecosystem. So moving on to the next question. If a tropical rainforest is removed, it does not regenerate quickly as compared to a tropical deciduous forest. Why? Look into the options. Okay, here the soil of the rainforest is deficient in nutrients. Propagals of the trees in a rainforest have poor viability. No, this is not the case. The rainforest species are slow growing. No, this is also not the case. Exotic species invade the fertile soil of rainforest. This is also not the case. So this is the answer. As I said earlier, if there is an increase in rainfall, it leads to leaching away of nutrients. Right. When the nutrients are leached out, obviously the soil in the rainforest will be deficient in nutrients. Right. So the answer will be A. This is all for today. Thank you. And if you like the video, do like, share and subscribe. Stay tuned for our next video on Principles of Ecology.